Hey artists, so the last time you saw this, I was working on the outline. What you'll notice is that after the outline, I'm probably going to have to go through and take an eraser to get rid of any lines that I deemed were unnecessary or unwanted. Sometimes I get carried away when I draw, and then all of a sudden I've drawn in a bunch of details. Though in hindsight, I did forget to add in that nail right there. Okay, so the important part to know is that coloring your hand is kind of a necessity, though if you wanted to just use one color to kind of fill in the space, that would be fine. What I'm looking for, however, is this use of value. Value we talked about a lot in your surreal rooms, okay? Value is an idea of pressure. So you're going dark, medium, light. I started using it in this bottom corner with my ruler. So the ruler tattooed on my arm is that yellow color. And I'm going to embellish it like I chose a much brighter yellow to use in my rendering of it. But I'm also going to layer colors on top of one another, kind of create a different blend. I'm going to ask that you try and use blends as well as value to fill in your project and what that might look like across your hand. I'm not concerned if you chose like a realistic color, like I am a Caucasian female, so I could choose a peachy color and be fine with it, but I also could choose a green or a purple and be totally happy with either. Since I'm undecided on that, let me show you what it might look like in your nail bed. So you could choose a color that's kind of neutral if you want to keep this all looking very normal. But what I might do, I might start in my nail with whatever color I want, but I'll start heavy where it touches the skin. And then as I get towards the end of that nail bed, I'm going to lighten up to where I'm barely putting that color down. And that use of value is what's going to make that nail look like it's round. If I want to do it on this, I could do heavy in the corner and then go to light, and I could just carry around, or I could also do it coming towards the center to create a highlight in the middle, okay? So let's see it again. Heavy pressure on the edge and barely touching as you get towards the center of that nail. And then do the exact same thing on the other edge. Heavy pressure and push towards that center. And then what you're creating is this illusion that light is either hitting those or you're giving it the roundness, okay? If you don't want to do that and you kind of like what this looks like and you just want to highlight kind of on one side of the nail, all I'm looking for is that you choose one side that has heavy pressure. It's your darkest of that color. And then as you extend across the nail, it gets lighter and lighter and lighter. Okay, so it gives that illusion that it's crossing over. Okay, the same thing could be done with your hand. Okay, so you think about it. We are talking about rectangular prisms for the palm of our hand. We're talking about cylinders, and we're talking about cones for the top. So what that might look like, let's say I want to do it in, let's do it in purple so that we can see it a little better. Okay, if this is a cylinder and it's round like a tube of chapstick or a bottle of water or a can of soda, that means that much like my fingernail, I'm going to start dark on one side, and then as I work my way across my finger, I'm going to get lighter and lighter and lighter. And that would extend all the way up. So as I'm working across that finger, I'm going to get lighter and lighter and lighter, just like I did in the nail bed. So if you find a method that you like, some of my students in the past have liked it. They'll do their nail beds first, and then however they decide to do those, then they go through and they fill in their fingers, because then they have something to kind of follow. It's kind of tricky. I don't want to lose the detail. I honestly, because I'm doing in color pencil, I can just color right over. You could work in color in between those, but it will be easier to color right over. I would just suggest no markers for this. Markers just do not allow us as artists to capture detail. It actually washes over details. So let's take a look at if you wanted, like in these nail beds, I did a highlight down the center as if light was hitting on the top of my hand, not the side. So if I wanted to mimic that same thing in the finger, I would go heavy pressure, and then as I find kind of the center, I'd lighten up, and then I'd start on the other crease of the hand, heavy, 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 and then barely touching to where it's the lightest in the center. I don't have a pure white of the paper. I don't know if you can tell that, like the color pretty much touches. There's no white left on the paper, but as long as you can get it to where there is barely any color running down the center, you should be able to make your hand look very 3D, okay? You could do this, and I'm going to do it in colored pencils because it's easy and I have a lot of them, but you could do it in chalk. Even sidewalk chalk would work. And I mean, like Conte, I have that, but I mean, like, I like to draw, so I have a lot of different materials. The only thing I would say not to use is markers. So anything's up for grabs. So as you're starting to look, what I'm asking you to do is use value so that these fingers, you don't lose the form you created with lines. You created all this wonderful form by using ellipses in your nail beds and curved lines to build up the knuckles, as well as even just capturing those indentions in your fingers that insinuate a knuckle is there, and any convex or concave lines that you added in for those knuckles. That's important. So if you go through and you just color in a matte color, it's going to wash out all those details. And that's why value is really important to put into your piece, okay? Students get really frustrated with the hand itself because then it's like you're having to work across a very large surface. So what I would say is after you've colored in thumb, fingers, everything, choose one side. So like I would just look at this one finger. And since I have a dark line that extends down the edge of it, I'm going to take that dark line down, and then I'm going to gradually start to fill in the color there, okay? So that it can travel across the palm. It's trickier over here as I'm trying to mimic because I have to go from light and then blend it all the way across over here, okay? So when you do this, my only piece of advice is that it's like work in tight zigzags that go across your hand. And you would want to at least start on one side of your hand being dark and then travel across to the lightest section. And since this is pretty light, I have to blend. I've got to keep my striations close together. So I can't do that 5th grade zigzag and scribble really loosely, or people are going to pay attention to how I colored and not necessarily what I colored. Remember, if you use the side of your colored pencils as opposed to the tip of your colored pencil, it makes this assignment go by a lot faster because then the coloring component isn't going to kill you. It's going to allow you to just use a whole bunch of color as opposed to just a little, okay? And then I'm just going to extend across my paper until it's finished. So as you're starting to look, as you look through student examples, some students just use black and white and they did some shading with like a gray or a black, and they built up the form that way. Some students colored in their entire hand and then they added tattoos because I thought that looked really cool. Every year that I've done it with students, it's kind of changed dependent on my group. And since I don't have the privilege of being with you and kind of seeing where all of our heads are at, I'm going to give you the opportunity to kind of explore how you would want to finish that in, okay? The only thing you're required to do is create a single hand gesture. So minus this live long and prosper, the Star Trek gesture. I am asking that you add in knuckles and nail bed in each finger that you can see one. If you have like, if you're making a peace sign, you're going to negate the fingers that you can't see, but then you would have to add in maybe knuckle lines or creases or, you know, indents that don't exist on my own hands. You'd have different details. But you have to create the nails and the knuckle lines, as well as use value, so this pressure from dark to light, to fill in your hand, okay? What I am looking for towards the end of our fifth grade year, going into middle school, is that you are showing me that you can work on this idea of craftsmanship. So as we're finishing up, I don't want to see that fifth grade zigzag. Like, you can see my striations, like you can see where I colored up and down across, but they're pretty close together. So I'm just asking you to be very cautious of how you are putting this together, whether you're using a bunch of colors, being realistic or unrealistic, but that you're being thorough with your design. And if you choose to add tattoos, you definitely may. It might make it more enjoyable to color. What I've done in the past, however, are some different ones. So this is what I'm asking you to do. In the past, I've done like high fives, but you'll notice this one was done with shapes, and you can kind of see where I did the square to start, and then I added in my lines that I could see on my hand and try to get that arch in, so it was like I was giving a high five. But this is much bigger than my own hand, so I was able to embellish it and make it a much larger hand by using shapes. I also did a funny one, and then this one, you know, so I could slug you in the arm if you look down, but that, or it could be an okay. But this one I just did on tan paper, since I, you know, am pretty white. And then I added in highlights with chalk, and I just chose one color and just did dark to light and used the light of the paper to be the light of my skin. But it's entirely up to you, the course that you take, but you are required to trace your hand in a gesture or use shapes to create a hand in a gesture. One gesture is all. I'm asking you to capture the nails that exist, as well as the creases in your knuckles. And I'm asking you to use value when you start to color in your hand, whether it be with one color or multiple colors. And it does not have to be realistic. If you want to cut it out when you're done so that you can see if it reads as a hand, that is a great way to do it. It's super cool when you get them cut out. I have a lot of arms floating around my house right now, but this is what I want you to take a picture of and post to our Google Classroom when you're done. All right, good luck, have fun, and if you have any questions, email me or post to our page.